I'm here in beautiful South Island at the University of Otago doing a presentation amongst glorious old buildings on the sociology that is to come. I know a number of you asked me for a copy of the presentation, so here it is. This, I believe, is quite useful if you like societies, if you are passionate about how societies were formed, are forming, and can form, and how you can influence it. Stick around to listen to this short 10-minute presentation. Imagine this: a crisis is unfolding on the other side of the world, a conflict threatening to pull in nations far and wide. There's a sense of urgency, a need to understand not only the political and economic implications, but the human dynamics at play. A working group forms to shape our nation's stance. Politicians, policymakers, psychologists, and historians fill the room, but they cannot move forward. But they are waiting on one more voice. They know that without a sociologist, someone to bring a deep human centered understanding of culture, power, and community, they risk missing the full picture. Now, picture this with me: a large organization is in chaos. There's dysfunction at every level, from the boardroom to the shop floor. Poor leadership, systemic corruption, and a team crying out for real change. The board assembles a group of specialists, lawyers, managers, and HR experts. But they know they also must have the perspective of a sociologist, someone who can uncover the hidden structures, understand the dynamics of power and trust, and help rebuild from the roots up. Now, picture this with me: our careers, our discipline, our passion, not a luxury, not a secondary thought, but an essential voice at every table. Imagine a world where every boardroom, every policy decision, every crisis response begins with an understanding of human behavior, culture, and society, where we as applied sociologists are front and center. But let me ask you this: are we there yet? Or are we still fighting for our place in these spaces? From what the conversations I've been listening to around these premises, I don't believe we're there yet. How many of us, even today, feel like we're called in as an afterthought instead of a must have? Let's talk about how we change that, how we make our work indispensable, and how we move forward from here. Kia ora, I'm Jessica Sneha Gray. Over the next 10 minutes or so, let's quickly look at how we can become indispensable at every table. Using examples and stories from my work, I hope I can draw a few key suggestions for you to take away. Just an alert though: I prefer facilitation rather than a monologue, so I hope we have the time to hear your stories as well. This is the structure I'm going to follow. I'm going to give you a short background about myself, a couple of case studies, and concluding thoughts. First and foremost, I'm a memory maker and a memory journaler. After all, sociologists are historians of the present. Essentially, amongst other things, my research looks at the links between people, place, and identity. So wherever I go, I explore these things. Now, I'd be interested to hear your rituals when you go to new places. Mine involves walking the place I'm in. Walking around this university, I came by the psychology department with these words inscribed in the front of the building. Where is it, this present? I thought it aligned so closely with part of my life's work. I considered it through a psychological lens and a sociological lens. Where do you think it is? You're listening to me. I'd listen to you now. If you're watching this as a recorded session, do post in comments. What is the meaning of this sentence? Where is it, this present? I'm going to ask you, if we have the time later, we can go through these points, but ponder on, who are you? Where were you? Where are you? Where are you going? I suggest thinking on these things as we go through the conference. I've given you some memory cards that you can jot your core visions to these questions and ponder about it as we go along. So if you are, essentially, we all know we are where we are. So if you are where we are, where you are, what happens when the way you are is influenced by significant changes due to demographics and other societal changes? Having traveled the world, we moved to the small place in the Bay of Plenty called Kauro. And amongst other things, one of the research in my case studies asks these two questions. How do locals experience shifting place identities? And what is the role of place identity in constructing an individual's identity? Now, as part of this presentation, the focus is not on the thesis that I did, it's about how we as sociologists or social workers, nurses, doctors, whoever is listening to it, can incorporate these findings as we go through our work. For me, the thing I learned was that every place is unique, every person is unique. And so the answers to these questions would be different to each person. And so we must deal with situations on a case by case basis, whether it's working with one person or working with a community, whether it's a one single patient or a public health measure for a population. Let's understand the community before coming up with solutions. Oftentimes, we look at things peripherally and come up with solutions, but we're not going to be given a seat at the table if we do that. But my findings, that some of the findings were that my research was based in a place called Cairo, and where people felt stigmatized, and people felt they were stigmatized simply because of where they lived. Just because they were from Cairo, they felt they didn't get jobs, they weren't respected. This is their feelings, whether it's true or not. Um, that's how they felt. And I also was interested to find the multi-layered cultural identity that exists in our places. So, for one example, is that on the one hand, there were people made for the place, which was a place was made for people. Like we as people would go into places, create the place, and then we live there. That was more a contemporary philosophy. And then on the other, there was that the place was made for the people, that people didn't necessarily have any more agency than the place. We were all one. People were just part of the ecosystem, where the mountain and the rivers had just as much agency as the persons. Now, how is all of this relevant for sociologists? We would be going to places to find resolutions, and we might have a personal bias on certain situations, but regardless, we must be able to speak our truth, know our truth, but also be able to find middle ground so community and social cohesion can occur. Another finding of the research was the rites of passage. What happened, who belonged and who didn't belong, was a big question that sociologists asked. A couple of quotes about belongingness from my research was that one person said, this is my Turanga Waiwai, this is the place I belong. Whether I'm here forever or whether I moved away, I'm still an insider. This is where I grew up. And then another person pitches in and says, actually, you might think you're from here just because you're born here or you live here doesn't mean you're from here. You No Maori would do that. It's a cultural thing. So see how there's differences in worldviews. From my perspective as an applied sociologist, I'm not here to say what's right and what's wrong, but how do we find the synergies between these two perspectives? So both, regardless of what this you believe in, you can have social cohesion for our society. Rites of passage was another interesting thing. I'm going to share two stories. Now, there was a time in one of the places that I was in, there was an outsider from overseas wanted to be in a leadership position, but the people didn't want that. They said, well, we respect you. You can be part of us, but not in a position like that. To get to a position like that, you needed mana and authority, and you needed to have seen the bad times and the goods, so we can give you that position. of power, but not as soon as you moved into a new place. I'm going to share a second story. So now about 10 years ago, um, I did a presentation on how do you make it wasn't the Bay of Plenty. They were looking at how to make the Bay of Plenty more prosperous. So I did a presentation on how do you put the plenty back into the Bay of Plenty. I can just see there's a spelling error there. Yeah, and the presentation was theoretically sound. The presentation was sound from a policy perspective, but a person told my mom later on, all that may have been, but it's not going to work because it's aspirational, but it doesn't reflect the realities of this town. And 10 or 15 years later, with a few more wrinkles on my face, I've realized that we need to know the in-depth nuances of places so we can actually make informed, offer solutions that are respected, and at the very least, be at least invited to the table. And that's what is relevant to the sociology that is to come. Our profession is in the cusp of change. For us to become great, we need to become more relevant to our audiences. This means that we must not be afraid to stand up for what we have found to be true, but also not to just jump into conclusions based on peripheral knowledge. We need to truly understand the communities that we are working with, advising on. Now, I advise on conflict resolution issues, and I have noted how many experts jump into conclusions based on desk research without understanding the people on the ground. And when we do that, we're not respected. Essentially, for us to be part of the table, we need to be there, not just doing research, but through it all. In good times and in bad, we need to be those place doctors that people can depend on to come up with logical solutions that has taken into consideration human living, human feeling, human dreaming, and human desired societies so that we can get rid of the cancers of hate and viruses of polarization. Basically, anything that kills social cohesion. I'd like you to think on these things. How do we make sure we are truly relevant? I'm going to give you a second case study. Uh, As I mentioned before, you know, I knew that early on, spending years behind doing an academic paper that went behind a paywall was not for me. It is important, but it wasn't for me. So I wanted to be in the field as a clinician, applying research. So for many years, I have worked independently doing counseling and place investigation analysis and advisory. So some time ago, I also do temporary management oversight. So some time ago, I was overseeing an organization and I encountered an inexperienced 20-something health practitioner who knew it all, who said, "Oh, do you know about health?" And I explained to this person, look, I appreciate your skill set to give me a medicine and make me feel better. But sociologists are place doctors, We can go into places, understand the nuances of places, and help places heal and help individuals within the place. I think more of us as sociologists should push back and stand up for what we are good at because we are all excellent in our fields, whether it's health, whether it's geopolitics, whether it's academics. We need to fight in a healthy way for our place in the world. One of the other things I do in my work is counseling and external supervision. But when I do that, the difference I offer is that I take a sociological lens. Now, that's not to negate the psychological theories that exist, which is also very valid. And there's a place for that. But I take a sociological lens. I start with the belief that most issues, whether it's personal or organizational, is somehow linked to our environment. And then when you unpack how that environment has influenced us, our Wairua, our health, our well-being, that can be a starting point towards healing. The other thing is that healing is not something that the psychologist or the therapist tells a person prescribed something and then the person sped up. From a sociological lens, a healing is co-created. So we cannot, a person or an organization cannot heal unless there's co-creation. And using those lenses, I have been quite efficient in offering a different solution to people's problems. But the great thing about that is that then sociology as a profession gains more momentum and more reputation. And hopefully one of these days that it gains me in my state as one of a leading clinical applied sociologist in this country and around the world. Um, Place analysis, what does that mean? Essentially, I provide state of your place reports to organizations or towns or nation states. And that again, using a sociological lens, we can look at the nuances of what happened in the past, the present, and leading into the future. We can just offer a different lens that people can look at the world through. So if you are an organization in strife, and if you're just getting an HR perspective, that's just one perspective. If you're only getting a legal perspective, that's one perspective. Whereas a sociologist looks at the picture from all these different aspects to provide a solution that works for the humans within the place. And I encourage more of you to speak up on those things. Think on these things. How do you work to establish a balanced middle ground, remaining objective while also still clearly advocating for your perspective, your biases, and your preferences? Hopefully, if we have the time, we can talk about these things. You see, people don't ask an oncologist what they do. That's easy. People don't necessarily even ask a psychologist what they do because people know. But I have found that there is not enough understanding of what a sociologist does. This could be because the scope is vast and there's a lot of substreams within that wide scope. My colleagues, I do know that we are in the cusp of change, and it is up to us to market, to brand, to promote our profession, and not just stop at marketing and branding, but also do the work and do it really well and efficiently so we can be at that table making change. I want to be at those tables, the geopolitical, um, the conflict resolution table, to provide social cohesion to humankind. Oftentimes, my clients ask me, what on earth does sociology mean? So over time, I've developed this acronym on what I think it means. I'd be interested to hear your perspectives, but here it is. S stands for studying human behavior. O is observing social dynamics. C stands for challenging societal norms. I is investigated cultural patterns. O, organize communities to change. L, lead social transformations. O, optimize societal well-being. G, generate solutions for social issues. Integrate diverse perspectives. Support informed decision making. Transform lives through insight. And for best of all, shape a better future for all. We can all write until eternity comes back. But if we are not shaping a better future for a large number of people, what is the point? What is the point of humankind if we can't make this world better than we found it? At the start of this presentation, I showed the thought provoking phrase displayed at the School of Psychology. Where is it, this present? Psychologists might argue that present is a fleeting moment, one we experience through the lens of perception, emotion, cognition, shaped by our past and influencing our mental well being. They may focus on how individuals navigate this moment internally, what it means to be in the present, and how it impacts the psychological state. We, as sociologists, would say that the present cannot be truly understood without looking outward at the social, cultural, and historical forces that shape and constrain it. The present is where human behavior, rooted in past experiences and societal structures, interacts with the shared aspirations for the future. For us, the present is both a product of what came before and a canvas for what's yet to come, influenced by the collective and individual actions of people in their social worlds. To be relevant and impactful, we as sociologists must actively promote how our discipline bridges these perspectives. While psychologists focuses on individual experiences and internal processes, we emphasize the interconnectedness of people, environments, and societies. Sociology offers a lens that connects personal struggles to larger structural forces, demonstrating how the past shapes the present and how the present can shape the future. We must advocate for the value of sociology in addressing the complex challenges of our time, showing how we contribute to understanding not only individual behavior, but also the societal systems that influence it. By communicating our unique insights and collaborating across disciplines, we can highlight sociology's critical role in empowering individuals and communities to navigate their realities and create meaningful change. This bridging of perspectives makes sociology not just relevant, but essential in fostering holistic, informed solutions to the many issues our world here in 2024 is facing. Let me tell you a story to end. Several years ago, I found myself at the crossroads. I was in a small community, much like Kaviro, in another part of the world. In a small town, there was a room filled with skulls, much like the image of the Roman chapel you see on the screen. The words outside still haunt me. What you are now, we once were. What we are now, you shall be. I made friends with a wise old lady there who empowered me through her stories. She'd seen it all, the good, the bad, and the ugly. At her age, it was time to make sense of it all. To make sure we learn from the past, embrace the good, and most importantly, ensure that we do not repeat the mistakes from the past. She told me that, that I shouldn't, I despair because people had told me, oh, you should have become a medical doctor. Oh, what a shame. But this person told me she told me that as a sociologist, I had the power to make change while there was breath in my body. My colleagues, I'm telling you today, as historians of the present and as clinical psychologists, as sociologists, as historians of the present and an applied clinical sociologist, I believe that we have the opportunity to not just study history and psychology, but to recraft and reshape books by making a difference in the society today. To do that, though, we mustn't come up with conclusion based on populist rhetoric or uninformed peripheral thoughts. We must go in depth, find the truth, find our truth, understand our biases, but be able to stand in that middle ground. Being in the middle ground may mean you get hit on both sides, but it's from this middle ground that change can occur. And when we do that, we can leave behind a place that is more socially cohesive and less polarized. But let's also recognize that we won't finish this task. Every community, every society is in the process of becoming. We as sociologists are here to guide that process, to help people understand who they are, where they've been, and where they can go. The power of sociology lies not just in studying the past or analyzing the present, but in shaping the future where everyone has the chance to thrive. Let's work together to shape that future for all. That's all, folks. Now I'm interested in your profound thoughts and stories.